After the Korean War, disturbing new intelligence reaches Washington. Hundreds of American troops are still being held captive, subjected to brainwashing experiments, and then killed. Mind control research back home intensifies. The new goal is to cause an individual to become subservient to an imposed control, to the point where he will perform acts against his will and then have no memory of the act. The search for a real-life Manchurian candidate begins. To produce such an assassin, the CIA faces two main challenges: how to induce amnesia and how to program in new behavior.
We are not professing to tell you the complete story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. Right. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.
This is a story that has been told in bits and pieces. This is an attempt to pull most of it together. We know we don't have the full story. We do, however, have some striking new revelations and insights.
But it was a discovery here in Basel, Switzerland, at Sandoz Laboratories by Dr. Albert Hofmann that led the intelligence agencies of America to believe that they had found the panacea. The discovery was lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. Millions of dollars would be spent on LSD research at universities throughout the country, and word would begin to spread on campus about this so-called mind-blowing drug. And suddenly, there was the counterculture of the 60s.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Dr. Timothy Leary, the 1960s Johnny Appleseed of LSD.
The CIA funded and supported and encouraged hundreds of young psychiatrists to experiment with this drug. The fallout from that was that the young psychologists began taking it themselves, discovering that it was an intelligence-enhancing, consciousness-raising experience.
Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme whose ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life. And the only explanations given to me were that, quote, the end justifies the means, and, quote, I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation. By the time I left to go home, just like every time from then on, I would remember only whatever explanations Dr. Robert G. Heath of Tulane Medical University gave me for the odd bruises, needle marks, burns on my head, fingers, and even the genital soreness. I had no reason to believe otherwise. They had already begun to control my mind. The next year, I was sent to a lodge in Maryland called Deep Creek Cabins to learn how to sexually please men. I was taught how to coerce them into talking about themselves, and it was Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, kept George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible, so that later when the funding for mind control and radiation started to dwindle, projects would continue. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old when this sexual humiliation began. Once a crude remark was made by Dr. Gottlieb about a certain possible leak over New Orleans East involving a large group of retarded children who are being given massive doses of radiation. He asked, why was Wilson so worried about a few retarded kids? After all, they would be the least likely to spill the beans. I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed all this up and need just to forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, and subsequent mental and physical distress that I've been robbed of the ability to work and even to bear any children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor should it ever have been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know just what is fact and what is fiction. It is our greatest protection against the possibility of this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I've given you today, the truth, and I thank you for your time.
Satanism may be a constitutionally protected religion, but similar to another recent case at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Here, charges surface connecting ritual child abuse at the Presidio Daycare Center to the devil cult. It was here, parents and others allege, that as many as 60 young children were ritualistically abused by soldiers. What actually was done to the kids?
Oral copulation, sodomy, defecation, they were urinated on.
Dr. Aquino, the high priest of the Church of Set.
Temple of Set.
Temple of Set, also a colonel, interestingly enough, in the United States Army.
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino led a double life as a satanic high priest. The colonel's cult is listed in the San Francisco telephone book, and his phone answering machine boasts of his affiliation.
This is the Temple of Set. The temple is the only international satanic religious institution fully recognized by the United States government.
Indeed, the Army does officially recognize Satanism as a legitimate religion and supplies chaplains with this guide for ministering to the satanic soldier. Yet unofficially, some charge that Army bases have become sanctuaries for devil worshippers. Just last month, under a full moon, I took a midnight tour of the Presidio grounds with police investigator Ed Abanofsky.
Are you saying that there was a satanic cult active right here on the Army base?
Yes, we believe so. There's evidence to substantiate that. They had satanic rituals going on. There's an altar in there, and all of the graffiti on the wall would indicate that.
Let's see if I can see it. How'd you find this place?
This is a fortification during World War II. During World War II, where they had gun batteries.
I can see a pentagram painted on the wall. I can see the words Prince of Darkness. On this wall, I see several inverted crosses and other obvious satanic ritualistic paintings or symbols. Joseph, we've agreed to conceal your identity, but you are an officer in the United States Army.
That's correct.
And you were an officer in the United States Army during the time you were a member of this satanic organization.
Yes.
Did the authorities at the Presidio know that a satanic organization was active on their base during the time that you were a member?
They were very much aware of it, yes.
The former chief juvenile investigator at the Presidio, Ed Abanofsky, is here. He's now a deputy sheriff in Santa Clara County. Colonel Aquino, we note, sir, for the record, that you were originally implicated in the dreadful charges of child abuse. We note also that no charges were ever brought against you, and presumably you have been cleared. Would you like to comment on why those charges were brought against you?
Well, the entire time that the so-called child molestation scandal was occurring at the Presidio, the time period when these terrible events were supposedly taking place, I was assigned to the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., and my wife was out there living with me.
But is it not a fact that a 3.5-year-old girl identified you as the alleged perpetrator of molestation?
So you wouldn't have gone after Jimmy Savile if he was still alive?
Well, it depends what he's alleged to have done.
Well, we know what he's alleged to have done. It's a variety of sexual crimes. I mean,
including satanic ritual abuse.
You find it funny?
I do.
Which bit?
Satanic ritual abuse doesn't exist. It's like alien abduction.
So are you saying that the people who've made these allegations are just making it up?
I would think so.
The body was tucked underneath the front wheels on the curb side, wrapped in yellow blankets and tied with guitar string.
What was the condition of the body when you found it?
It had a number of unusual wounds on it. One of the most unusual things was a design carved into the chest of the individual. And once we examined it more closely, it was an upside-down pentagram.
The Devil's Pentagram, the inverted five-pointed star found on the unidentified corpse of St. Joseph's victim. They did much more to John Doe number 60, but we'll spare you the details. Caught and convicted of murder, kidnapping, and ritual abuse, St. Joseph and another cult member are currently serving long prison sentences. This 22-year-old, call him Jay, escaped from the House of Horrors wearing only a dog collar. For 4 days, he had been ritualistically tortured by a man named Bob Berdella.
He took the transformer and hooked it to my genitals and stepped back and took pictures while I'm flopping around.
What a sick dog.
It seemed to never end, you know.
After Jay escaped through a window by burning the ropes that bound him to the bed, the police arrested Berdella. When they searched his home, they found over 250 photographs of young men, including Jay, in the process of being tortured, in some cases fatally. Hidden in the walls of the home, they also found a human skull.
This hole right here and the tail, they cut the tail off. The same thing with the ears.
They cut the ears off.
Right.
So you two have no doubt that your animals were used in some kind of ritual?
Right.
Yes. All the blood was gone out of them, too. Every one of them, the blood was drained.
No blood, no insides, eyes pulled out, everything.
Late one night last December, 4 teenagers who had been dabbling in Satanism carried baseball bats, a cat, and a length of rope to an isolated spot near their small town here in Missouri. By the time the night was over, the cat had been mutilated and one of the boys beaten to death by the other 3, who then dumped his body in a well. One of the kids who did it, Pete Rowland, is now serving life sentence without parole here at this maximum security facility in Fulton, Missouri. The other 2 boys, his classmates, were also sentenced to life.
Have you ever been in
Here, in the first interview since the murder, Pete Rowland talks about the satanic elements of the crime.
What was it about Satanism that attracted you?
Power.
I'm sorry for you, young lady, and I sentence you to a term of life in prison. I'm sorry for you, and I wish you good luck. Remove her from the courtroom, Mr. Sheriff.
17-year-old Melissa Ernest and 2 other teenage members of her coven admitted drinking her 15-year-old victim's blood, then dancing around her still warm body.
Yesterday's conviction of Scott Waterhouse for the murder of 12-year-old Giselle Cody may finally bring an end to talk of a satanic cult in the town.
Police arrest 17-year-old Ricky Casso for the ritual murder of 15-year-old Gary Lowers. Casso gouged out his victim's eyes.
When we last spoke, was the witness
assuming the identity of Paul Benassi?
Yes.
Who is the witness now?
Wesley.
You were created in 1974?
Yes.
Okay. And what triggered your creation, Wesley?
I don't believe I can relate that information at this time because it has no value to this. Plus, it is... I can't.
You're under oath. You're
I
testifying.
am not under oath yet. You've never given me the oath.
Is he
I
not
have been
sworn?
ready.
No, you didn't swear. Remember, we suggested that.
Let's swear Mr. Wesley right now.
Do you, Mr. Wesley, swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but so? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Now I'm going to ask you, what triggered the arrival or development or birth of your personality, West Lee, in 1974?
I cannot give that information under direct orders.
Orders by whom?
I cannot say.
Mr. DeCamp, would you please instruct your client when he has to answer these questions?
Yes. You're supposed to answer these questions. Does this have to do with Monarch?
Yes.
If I use the code, will that help? Which I just obtained in the last hour. D6413782, program XPY Eagle Alex Hope. Please go ahead and answer all questions.
I was created by a government program.
Which government program?
Monarch.
And what is Monarch?
Monarch is an operation that was created by the United States government to create spies for other countries. They use children for the purpose that they are easily integrated into multiple personalities because they can dissociate. Monarch is a program that is run by Michael Angelo Aquino, who was an Army Reserve colonel at Presidio. He is also the leader of the Temple of Set. He also runs a child daycare center. He also is involved in human sacrifice. Monarch, as I said, was a program that used children to make multiple personalities for future use as spies and as a way to take over the United States government. The personalities were created at the first.
Excuse me, who was intending to take over the United States government?
I do not know that information.
Did you understand Mr. Aquino to be working on behalf of the United States or against the United States?
I believed he was working on behalf of the United States.
This was a government-sponsored program?
Yes.
Okay. You were 7 years old at the time that you were recruited?
I was actually 3 years old when it first began, but I was not created until later on.
Who created you?
I was created by Monarch.
Do you mean Mr. Aquino? Who in Monarch created you?
I was created by Monarch. I do not know who.
What were you told when you were 4 years old that you recall now about the Monarch program?
When I first got involved, I was molested by an airman from Offutt Air Force Base who was involved in Monarch. His job was to recruit kids from the local neighborhood who he could make dissociate by doing traumatic things to them at a very young age. Later on, when they get to school age, they would simply pick me up at school, and I would simply miss a day or two for training.
Now, is it your testimony that there was a United States plan or plot which intended to create multiple personality syndrome or dissociative personalities in children?
Yes, to my knowledge.
And that you were a victim of a plot of the United States, and that that's when your multiple personalities first began to develop?
Yes.
And now, what is your understanding of the reason that Monarch wanted children with dissociative disorders or multiple personality disorders?
Because if one was captured in the future spying, the personality or the person that was captured would go into a personality that would have no useful information. There would be other personalities that would come out that would render the person to seem hallucinatory or to seem as if he was indeed crazy. In fact, their program, which was named Star Wars, was in fact a program in which we were taken aboard so-called alien spacecrafts which were in tunnels in Colorado, which were not real spaceships, nor were they real aliens. We were simply induced with drugs so that we would not render reality to anything that we would see. And later on, if we ever related this information, it would come out and appear as if we were crazy.
So you were trained actually to be a spy?
Yes.
On behalf of the program known as Monarch?
Yes.
For the purpose of ultimately taking over the government of the United States?
Yes.
How long did you work for Monarch?
I do not consider it working for them. I consider it more or less them being in control of me. From as I said, probably 1970 until 1990.
Are you currently controlled by Monarch?
Yes.
Are you fearful of the consequences of what you have revealed here today? Are you fearful that Monarch will somehow, do you feel that you are at risk by what you have revealed?
Yes.
Have you felt threatened in the past by the members of Monarch?
Yes.
And when did you start feeling threatened by members of Monarch?
From the breakdown of the multiple personality system, which happened in 1986, which allowed me to start revealing memories that other personalities contained about abuses.
So once the breakdown started to occur, you became fearful that you were at risk because of that breakdown.
Yes.
Has anyone from Monarch ever contacted you since 1986?
Yes.
Who has contacted you from Monarch?
I cannot reveal that because I do not know what their names are.
They use code names.
Yes.
What are some of the code names that people use?
The Eagle.
What has the Eagle done that has been threatening?
The Eagle makes phone calls that initiate hypnotic suggestive personalities, which are not real personalities, that were programmed in by Monarch. And what these codes that he says to me when he calls make the other personality or the suggestion come to pass, whereas I will do something in that personality and will not remember it at all in any other personality. It will be forgotten, and I won't even have a record of it as myself.
You don't believe that Monarch is in any way involved in any kind of conspiratorial activity that involves child abuse or any of your other allegations?
I know that they involve with child abuse because they have a a lot of schools where they train girls to be prostitutes and boys, as myself in the early days, they used us to, how shall I say, get what they wanted. Let's
What
say
did they want?
they had a politician who liked girls or boys, men, women. They would get them into a position where they would have that, a boy or a girl or whatever it was, with them. They would videotape it and use it later for blackmail.
And you say this plan broke down in 1986, but yet you told me that you still felt that you were under the control.
I am still under their control because I do not answer phones anymore because that's how they get the others to, the triggers is what I'll call them. They're not personalities, they contain no memories at all. They were put in as hypnotic suggestions and only come out when, as I said, a code is presented to them. And that happened several times in 1989, which is why Paul and Mikey's memories are so confused. At that time, they were attempting to destroy me because they were attempting to access suicidal personalities and other personalities that would get me in trouble with law enforcement.
And you recognize and know the members of Monarch individuals who might have been involved in the Omaha area?
I only have a few.
Who are those people?
Persons. Bill Plemons.
How do you spell his name?
P-L-E-M-M-O-N-S. Works off of Offutt.
Is he employed by the United States?
I believe so. I am not.
Bill Plemons is one of the individuals involved in training children.
He is a controller, yes.
Who else?
Gary Ackerman.
And where does Mr. Ackerman live?
He is a congressman. I'm not aware of where he is from.
You don't know which jurisdiction?
No.
And you're saying that he is a controller and part of this?
He is not a controller. He is a lead of the conspiracy.
He's in charge of the conspiracy?
He's one of the leads of the conspiracy. I am not able at this time to access much more information because of programs that were purposely put into me to... I cannot place faces because they have programs that disallow that. They are simply erased, and they have also used means to insert other names.
Who programmed you?
Involved. I was programmed by Monarch.
Who?
That includes psychiatrists from Offutt Air Force Base.
Who is that?
I do not know. They never allowed us to know names except for our direct controller, which was Bill Plemons. I only knew of a Colonel Aquino because I was also involved in the Temple of Set.
When were you programmed?
I was programmed beginning in 1974.
Were you trained in the area of prostitution and homosexuality?
Yes.
And where did that training take place?
Offutt Air Force Base.
And did that also occur in 1974?
Yes.
And how long a period of time did that training last?
Roughly 1974 until 1980.
So during those years you received periodic training about homosexuality and about prostitution?
Yes.
Anything else that you've received training on?
Yes.
What?
How to photograph documents in my mind to be able to relate that information to deprogrammers at a later date.
Have you personally engaged in any spying?
Nothing that would be considered spying except for in training. I have not spied for them because my training was not complete. I was still learning.
Are they expecting that at some future time that you will engage in some form of spying or espionage?
Not anymore.
Why?
Because the program was discontinued when the program started to break down in 1986. My initial program was to, as a young man, get adults who were powerful political leaders into positions where they could be compromised.
That was your mission?
That was the initial mission. The whole mission was for me to go into the military service and become an officer. And a few years after that, retire from the service. Not retire after 20 years, but after 6 years. And move to Germany. And then their initial plan to take over or to run the government was to put me in an ambassador spot. And then later to come back to the United States and to run for an office, and they would be the ones who control everything that I did.
So you would be an operative, so to speak?
I would be a puppet.
A puppet.